You ever notice how the most self-aware person in the room is usually the most unbearable to be around? Yeah, I'm talking about that friend who constantly announces they're an overthinker, or the co-worker who won't stop reminding everyone they're such an empath. Here's the thing nobody talks about. Self-awareness was supposed to set us free, but for a lot of people, it's become their entire identity. And that's a problem. Look, I'm not here to tell you self-awareness is bad. It's not. Understanding yourself is important. But somewhere along the line, we crossed a wire. We went from using self-awareness as a tool to using it as a costume. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. So in this video, we're going to dig into the dark side of self-awareness. The side nobody wants to admit exists. Because yeah, knowing yourself is great. But what happens when that knowledge becomes the very thing that traps you? Let's get into it. First, let me paint you a picture. You're scrolling through social media and you see a post. Someone writes, "I'm such a perfectionist, I just can't help it." Or maybe, "I'm an introvert, so I need to recharge alone." Sounds harmless, right? Maybe even relatable. But here's where it gets weird. These people aren't just describing themselves, they're performing themselves. They're announcing their personality traits like they're reading off a script. And the more they say it, the more they become it. This is what I call awareness as performance. It's when self-awareness stops being an internal tool and starts being an external identity. You see, real self-awareness is quiet. It's noticing your patterns, understanding your triggers, and then doing something about it. It's private work. But performative self-awareness, that's loud. It's labeling yourself in every conversation. It's making sure everyone knows you're self-aware. And ironically, that's the least self-aware thing you can do. Because once you start performing your self-awareness, you stop growing from it. Think about it. If you constantly tell people, "I'm just really anxious," then anxiety becomes your brand. It becomes the lens through which you see everything. And when something becomes your identity, you unconsciously protect it, even if it's hurting you. This is the trap. Self-awareness was supposed to help you change, but instead, it locks you in place. You become so attached to the label that you forget the label was never supposed to be permanent. Let me give you an example. Let's say someone realizes they have trust issues. That's step 1. That's awareness. Good. Step 2 should be working on those trust issues. Healing, growing, moving forward. But here's what actually happens a lot of the time. Instead of step 2, they just stop. They wear "I have trust issues" like a badge. They bring it up in every relationship. They use it to explain away their behavior. And worst of all, they start to believe that's just who they are. So they never actually deal with it. See, the moment you turn a flaw into an identity, you give yourself permission to keep it. Because if it's just who you are, then why would you change? And that's the dark side. Self-awareness without action is just self-obsession. Now let's talk about therapy culture for a second. And before you come for me, I'm not anti-therapy. Therapy is great. Therapy saves lives. But let's be honest. Therapy language has leaked into everyday conversation in a way that's kind of broken. People throw around terms like trauma, triggered, narcissist, gaslighting, without really understanding what they mean. And again, it's performative. It's using the right words to sound self-aware, but not actually doing the work. I've seen people diagnose themselves with disorders they don't have just because they read a Twitter thread. I've seen people use therapy language to avoid accountability. "I was triggered" becomes an excuse instead of an explanation. And look, I get it. Language is powerful. Naming your pain is part of healing. But when you use that language as a shield, when you use it to avoid discomfort or growth, you're not healing. You're hiding. Self-awareness is supposed to make you uncomfortable. It's supposed to challenge you, but a lot of people have turned it into a comfort zone. Here's another thing. The self-awareness industrial complex. Yeah, that's a thing. We live in a world where there's a quiz for everything. What's your Enneagram? What's your attachment style? What's your love language? Your Myers-Briggs? Your zodiac chart? And don't get me wrong, these things can be fun. They can even be useful as starting points for reflection. But they've become shortcuts. People take a 10-minute quiz and suddenly think they've unlocked the mysteries of their soul. They read their Enneagram description and go, "Wow, this is so me." And then they stop there. They don't question it. They don't grow beyond it. They just accept it as truth. And here's the kicker. A lot of these frameworks are designed to be flattering. They're designed to make you feel seen. So you read your type and you feel validated, and that feels good. But validation isn't growth. You're not learning anything new about yourself. You're just finding new ways to confirm what you already believe. That's called confirmation bias, by the way, and it keeps you stuck. Real self-awareness doesn't feel good all the time. Real self-awareness is messy. It's confronting the parts of yourself you don't want to see. It's admitting you were wrong. It's recognizing your patterns even when they're embarrassing. It's not a personality type, it's a practice. But we've turned it into a product, and products are meant to be consumed, not lived. So people collect labels like trophies. They stack identities on top of each other. Introvert, empath, HSP, anxious attachment. Type 4, and they think that's self-awareness. But it's not. It's just a really detailed costume. All right, let's go deeper. Because there's another layer to this. Self-awareness can become a form of paralysis. You ever meet someone who's so in their own head that they can't actually do anything? They know all their flaws. They know all their patterns. They can psychoanalyze themselves for hours, but they never change. Because they're too busy observing themselves to actually live. This is what happens when self-awareness becomes self-surveillance. You start watching yourself like you're a character in a movie. You narrate your own life. You're constantly checking in with yourself, labeling your emotions, analyzing your reactions. And yeah, some of that is healthy, but when it becomes constant, it's exhausting. You're no longer present. You're just documenting your presence. And the irony is, the more you watch yourself, the less authentic you become, because you're performing even for yourself. You start curating your inner life the same way you curate your social media. You only allow certain thoughts, certain feelings, certain reactions. Anything outside of your self-concept gets rejected. And that's not self-awareness. That's self-imprisonment. Real growth happens when you stop watching and start doing, when you stop narrating and start experiencing, when you stop asking, why am I like this, and start asking, what am I going to do about it? Because here's the truth. Understanding yourself is only valuable if it leads to change. Otherwise, it's just mental masturbation. Now let's talk about the social aspect of all this. Because self-awareness has become a social currency. Being self-aware makes you look smart. It makes you look deep. It makes you look like you've done the work. So people perform it in conversations. They drop little insights about themselves to signal that they're evolved. Oh, I know I do that because of my childhood. Yeah, I have a hard time with vulnerability because of past relationships. And again, that stuff can be true. But when you say it out loud constantly, you're not processing it. You're broadcasting it. You're using self-awareness as a way to control how people see you. And that's manipulation, even if it's subtle. Because you're not being vulnerable. You're being strategic. You're giving people just enough to seem deep, but not enough to actually be seen. Real vulnerability is messy. It's not polished. It's not rehearsed. But performative self-awareness is a rehearsed monologue. And people can feel the difference, even if they don't know why. Here's the thing that really gets me. Self-awareness has become an excuse for bad behavior. You see this all the time. Someone does something hurtful, and instead of apologizing, they say, yeah, I know I'm like that. I'm working on it. But are they? Because if you're actually working on it, you wouldn't keep doing it. If you're actually self-aware, you'd change your behavior, not just acknowledge it. But people think that naming the problem is the same as solving it. It's not. Saying, I have anger issues, doesn't give you a free pass to yell at people. Saying, I'm bad at communication doesn't mean you get to ghost your friends. Self-awareness without accountability is just an alibi. And honestly, it's kind of insulting. Because you're asking people to give you credit for knowing you're hurting them while continuing to hurt them. That's not growth. That's entitlement. So here's where we need to flip the script. Self-awareness is not the destination. It's the starting line. It's not something you achieve and then put on your bio. It's something you practice, quietly, constantly, without needing applause. And real self-awareness includes awareness of your self-awareness. Which sounds weird, but stick with me. It means noticing when you're performing, noticing when you're using labels as excuses, Noticing when you're stuck in analysis instead of action. It means being humble enough to admit that you don't have yourself all figured out. Because you don't. None of us do. We're all works in progress. And the moment you think you've cracked the code on who you are, you stop evolving. So maybe the most self-aware thing you can do is stop talking about how self-aware you are. Maybe it's letting go of the labels and just being. Maybe it's trading performance for presence. Maybe it's recognizing that your identity isn't something you curate, it's something you live. And yeah, that's scarier. Because it means you can't hide behind your self-awareness anymore. You actually have to show up as yourself, without the script. But that's where the real growth happens. Not in the knowing, in the doing, not in the understanding, in the changing, not in the labels, in the living. Look, I'm not saying throw all your self-awareness out the window. I'm saying use it as a tool, not a trophy. Use it to build a better life, not a better image. Use it to grow, not to stay the same. Because the goal isn't to be the most self-aware person in the room. The goal is to be free. And freedom doesn't come from knowing yourself inside and out. It comes from being willing to let that self change. So if you've been using self-awareness as a shield, as an identity, as a performance, maybe it's time to put it down. Not forever. Just long enough to remember who you are without it, and then pick it back up as what it was always meant to be. A mirror, not a mask. A tool, not a trap. A beginning, not an end. Because the dark side of self-awareness isn't the awareness itself. It's what happens when we stop using it to grow and start using it to hide. And honestly, we all do it sometimes, but now that you see it, you can't unsee it. So what are you going to do about it? If this hit different, there's another video right there that'll keep you thinking.